Hello class, I'm filming this video to give you some further insight to your term paper. I would encourage you first off to also see the extensive guideline that I have on D2L about your term paper. It is a lengthy guideline, however I have written it that way on purpose to give you as much detail as possible about my expectations for the term paper, as well as steps on how to complete it from the very beginning to the very end. So please read that in detail. But this short video, I want to use it to unpack some of those expectations and to give you some general insight as you prepare to work on your term paper. So the basics of the term paper, as stated on the first page of the guideline, it's a 4 to 6 page paper. It is to be 12-point font and double spaced. And you should have you should turn it in when you're finished to the D2L Dropbox. Now, the term paper is based on David Howard Pitney's book, Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm X, and the Civil Rights Struggle of the 1950s and 60s, A Brief History with Documents. To let you know what that looks like, in case that's very mysterious, it looks like this. So, I realize most of you already have the book, and if you do, please go ahead and start reading it and taking notes as you go. I would encourage you to make notes on the margin or take notes in a separate notebook. I think you'll find that useful when you go to write your term paper. If you do not have the book yet, it is likely that the GHC bookstore has sent it back to the publisher because we're pretty far into the semester, and if that is the case, you need to order it online with some online booksellers such as Amazon, Barnes & Nobles, etc. And if you don't have the book, please order it as soon as possible, or you're going to be in a world of hurt for the term paper. Now, after you have read the book and are then ready to write your paper, the next step, and you'll see that on the first page of the guideline, is to choose your essay topic. And there are two options for that. And so choose one of those. Do not do both of them. That will be a major problem for you if you do that. You don't need to write two term papers. So choose one of them. And then once you have done that, when you write your term paper, keep in mind that you need to answer all of the questions, the interlocking questions in that particular essay option. And you'll need to go through and do that and consider them a series of interlocking questions that you need to address. And when you write your paper, you will need an introduction with a thesis statement, an argument. You'll need a main body in which you go through and answer the questions using specific examples. And the more specific examples you can give, the better. And then you'll need a conclusion in which you wrap your paper up and restate your thesis statement. Now again, the more specific examples you can give, the more detail you can give to answer the questions, the better. And also, keep in mind that when you're writing this, and I know a 4 to 6 page paper can sound intimidating, you could, and this is just a suggestion, you could make an outline before you begin writing. An outline, it does take a little time, but it can steer your thoughts, it can help you from getting off topic, it can organize your paper, make it easier to read, and easier to write. So that is not required, but is a helpful suggestion. Speaking of that, when you write your paper, do make sure it is organized in a logical fashion, whether you use an outline or not. Make sure that you don't jump around a lot. That makes it very confusing for the reader. Also, in terms of clarity, I would highly urge you to check your paper for grammatical and spelling mistakes and for any awkwardly worded sentences. And the best way to do this is to simply read it aloud before you turn it in. If you read a paper aloud, chances are you will catch awkward sentences, that you can then reword. You will find spelling errors, grammatical mistakes, and so forth. And of course, another way to help you out is to simply run it through spell check to catch some basic spelling errors. But I will count off for mistakes in that regard. And the purpose is to not to be nitpicky per se, but the more mistakes you have, grammatical mistakes, spelling mistakes, awkward sentences, the harder it will be to understand your paper. the purpose of requiring accuracy in that regard is that so your paper is clearly written. And a paper that is clearly written is easy to understand and communicates the points effectively. So do make sure that you pay attention to that. Now, another important thing that you will need to do as you're writing your paper is obviously to be as specific as possible, using as many examples as you can, but you'll also need to cite your sources. And that will include summing up information that you find in the book, or in some cases it will mean using direct quotations. And as this book deals with two very important historical figures, both of whom were quite skilled in the use of language, namely Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X, you will find some very good quotes to use in the book. So you'll want to use this. Now, do avoid lengthy quotations, as that will drown out your own voice, but quotes can make a good point at times. Now, when you do cite your sources, do note that this paper requires you to only cite from Howard Pitney's book. So only use his book. That will make it easier for you. This is not a research paper. And in addition to that, you will need to cite a minimum of 4 primary sources. You'll notice when you read his book, he has an introduction, which really describes Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X's role in the civil rights movement, and they're both very complicated figures. But then you get to read a series of documents from both of them, which gives you their own unique perspective. So you'll need to use a minimum of 4 of those primary sources in citing sources. Now, when you cite sources, whether you're summing up information or whether you're using a direct quotation, as I note on the guideline, use what is called the HIST method of citation. And what that means is before you quote, don't simply drop a quote on your paper. It's very awkward to have a quote just dropped in. But before you quote, introduce the quote. And I give a whole list of stock phrases that you can use to introduce a quote in the guideline. So introduce the quote, then cite it, then explain the quote in your own words. Unpack it. Give it further meaning, right? That will make your paper flow together. It will really drive home your point. It will make your paper much more effective in its argument. Now, for the citation style, the discipline of history uses the Turabian citation style, otherwise known as the Chicago manual style. And that means either footnotes or endnotes. And so use either footnotes or endnotes and use it consistently. Don't switch back and forth between the two. Choose one and stick with that. The guideline gives you examples of what that looks like. I give an example paragraph, and I use footnotes in that. You'll see the numbers in there, and you'll see the footnotes down below. So that'll give you a good example of what it should look like when you write your paper. I also give you instructions on how to insert footnotes or endnotes, and I give you numerous examples of what the Turabian style looks like, both for citations and in the bibliography. So please use the guideline. That's what it's there for, but you will need to use the Turabian citation style. And if you're not familiar with it, don't feel too bad about that. It is a fairly easy citation style to use once you get going with it. Now, one other thing for citing papers and writing your paper, you will need a bibliography or a works cited page at the end of your paper. And a bibliography or works cited is just simply a separate sheet of paper that lists your sources in alphabetical order. And you should do this using the Turabian citation style. And again, the guideline tells you exactly how to do that, but you will need that as well. On your first page of your paper, I don't really need a cover sheet. You can do that, but it is optional. The main thing I need on the first page of your paper is your name and the essay option that you have chosen to write on. Now, 2 last things to note before I conclude this video. First, I will grade the papers using the guideline, so that's why I want you to rely on it very heavily, because the criteria that I will use to grade it are spelled out in the guideline. And I will also, when I grade your papers in the Dropbox in D2L, I will use a rubric. And that that rubric will give you a lot more feedback on your paper. There are various categories in the rubric that I will grade by. And if you're interested in it, the rubric is within the D2L Dropbox. So if you want to look at the rubric beforehand, you can go in the D2L Dropbox and check it out. And note that that's what I will use to grade your paper. Now, I will also leave some comments as well, but the rubric will give you much more extensive feedback when you read your paper at the very end. And finally, as a reminder, please make sure that you do your own work for this term paper. And I know that isn't a problem for most of you, but I do want to remind you that plagiarism will not be tolerated for the term paper. In fact, plagiarism is discussed at length on the syllabus. So if you have questions, please refer to that. I give a number of examples and define it and talk about it in great length. If you have questions on that, please contact me individually. I'd be happy to discuss it with you via email or by phone. But as a reminder, the penalty for plagiarism on the term paper is an F in the entire course. Plagiarism on the term paper is a very serious matter in this class, so please don't go there. It will not be very pleasant for you if you do. And your papers will be, when you submit them in the D2L Dropbox, will be run through turnitin.com, and that's a plagiarism detection engine. So plagiarism it has no rewards in this class, so please do not do that. The easiest thing is to simply do your work and turn it in, and I would encourage you to do so. Well, I hope this video has been helpful to you. I wish you the best of luck as you work on your term paper. Please don't wait till the last minute to do it. The earlier you can start on it, the better your paper will be. And if you have questions while you're working on it, please feel free to contact me via email, and I'd be happy to help you out. All right, well, I hope this video is helpful, and I wish you the best as you begin on your term paper. I'll stop here. Bye.